Thanks for my lunch. Trish, you said what they say to you?
I'm officially auntie, bitch. I'm
auntie.
The voice crackled through Henry Ford Hospital's intercom at exactly 9:57 a.m. Code Silver. All units to basement level. Code Silver. Most patients didn't know what that meant. The nurses did. Active shooter. Carmen was sitting in the surgery prep area when the announcement hit. She watched a nurse's face drain of color, watched her hand start shaking as she reached for the phone. There's an active shooter in the basement, the nurse whispered, and suddenly the sterile quiet of the hospital exploded into chaos. Chairs scraped against linoleum as staff barricaded doors. Patients in wheelchairs were pushed into corners. Someone was crying. Someone else was praying. And in the basement, 47 people were trapped with the echo of gunshots still ringing in their ears. Erlene Ingram's mother was down there for outpatient surgery. Erlene paced the upper floors, her phone buzzing with unanswered calls. I was nervous about being shot, she'd tell reporters later. Not safe at all. Her voice still trembled days afterward. The lockdown lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of not knowing if the shooter was still inside, still hunting. 4 hours of families separated by concrete and fear. 4 hours of wondering if the person you loved was coming home. Outside, West Grand Boulevard looked like a war zone. Police cars lined the street, their red and blue lights painting the hospital walls. A helicopter circled overhead, its rotors cutting through the morning air like a mechanical heartbeat. ATF agents in tactical gear surrounded the building, their weapons drawn, their faces grim. But inside that basement, in those first moments after the shots were fired, there was only silence. The kind of silence that follows violence. The kind that makes your ears ring and your heart stop. Latricia Green Brown was 40 years old. She'd clocked in for her housekeeping shift at 7 a.m., just like she had hundreds of times before. She'd probably grabbed coffee from the break room, maybe chatted with a co-worker about weekend plans. Normal things. Human things. At 9:55 a.m., her ex-husband Mario Green found her in that basement. 2 minutes later, she was dead. The people who were there that day, they don't talk about the gunshots much. They talk about the silence that came after. The way sound seemed to disappear from the world. The way their hands wouldn't stop shaking for weeks. 47 people were in that basement when Latricia died, and most of them still wake up hearing those gunshots. If you're someone who believes survivors' trauma matters more than your scroll addiction, hit subscribe and comment survivors first. Or maybe you think PTSD is just content for your entertainment. Go ahead and tell us why you won't subscribe to support real stories about real people. Latricia Green Brown had a laugh that could cut through the worst kind of day. Ask anyone who worked the morning shift at Henry Ford Hospital, and they'll tell you the same thing. She was the one who'd check on you when you looked tired, slip you an extra coffee when the vending machine ate your dollar, remind you that your kids were lucky to have you when the job felt thankless. She was family, her co-worker said after. Not like family. She was family. Devin Wilford worked alongside Latricia in housekeeping for 3 years. She described her as humble, quiet, someone who kept to herself but always had time for others. She wasn't drama, Devin said, and in a place like Detroit, in a job like theirs, that meant everything. Latricia showed up, did her work, and went home to her children. Simple, steady, safe. Except she wasn't safe. Not even close. Every morning, Latricia checked her mirrors before leaving for work. Not for lipstick or loose hair, but for a white Dodge Charger that might be following her. She'd learned to vary her route, leave at different times, park in different spots. Small adjustments to stay alive. Her co-worker Tamara Canada knew about difficult exes. They'd bonded over it, actually, sharing stories during break times about men who couldn't let go, who made moving on feel impossible. But even Tamara didn't know the full extent of what Latricia was living through. The 50 phone calls to her workplace, the broken car windows, the clothes slashed to ribbons in her own driveway. Latricia was raising her children alone, working double shifts when she could get them, dreaming of a house with better locks and a yard where her kids could play without her watching the street. She talked about going back to school, maybe getting into medical administration. She had plans, goals, a future she was fighting for. But Mario Green was fighting harder to destroy it. She'd wake up some mornings to find her car vandalized. Other days, her phone would ring at work, and she'd hear his voice on the other end, calm and threatening, reminding her that he knew where she was, what she was doing, who she was talking to. The calls came so often that her supervisors started recognizing his voice. Still, Latricia showed up, clocked in, smiled at patients, helped her co-workers, went home to her children and helped with homework, and made dinner and pretended everything was normal. Because what else do you do when the system tells you your fear isn't enough? She tried being cordial with Mario, hoping it would calm him down. She tried ignoring him, hoping he'd lose interest. She tried reasoning with him, explaining that their marriage was over, that they both deserved to move on.
Murdered at work. A manhunt is underway in Detroit after a man walked into his ex-wife's job and opened fire, taking her life. Latricia Green Brown was shot in the basement of Henry Ford Hospital about 10 this morning.
And minutes after that shooting, police identified her ex-husband, Mario Green, as the suspect in that case. Security cameras caught him leaving the hospital just minutes after that shooting. Jay Scott Smith has been following the very latest developments in this case all day long. Jay, we now know Latricia had a valid personal protection order against Green.
Yes, indeed, she did. Good evening, everybody. And honestly, this was just a bad scene all the way around, as on this Friday night, as mentioned, one woman is dead. There are a lot of questions that need answering, and police are trying to get a dangerous man off the streets.
He produced a gun, handgun, and fired multiple shots, killing his ex-wife.
Detroit Police Chief Todd Bettison laid out what happened this morning at Henry Ford Hospital around 10:15 a.m. Bettison named this man, 53-year-old Mario Green of Bloomfield Hills, first as a person of interest, but now he's the prime suspect in the shocking killing of Latricia Green Brown. It set off a chaotic scene on West Grand Boulevard and a citywide manhunt.
We're actively looking for him. He is presumed to be armed and dangerous.
Surveillance cameras caught Green entering the hospital. From there, police say he went into the basement where Brown worked and shot her multiple times after an argument. After Brown was killed, he hopped in a white 2011 Dodge Charger and took off, headed north on the Lodge Freeway. The car was eventually found abandoned near Losser on the city's west side around 2 p.m., but Green remains on the loose. He's 6 feet tall and was last seen wearing all black and a gold chain. Mario Green also has a violent past, having served 6 years in state prison following a 2006 arson conviction. He's also served 4 years on probation for aggravated stalking. And most recently in June, he just finished a 3-year probation stint for failing to pay child support. Brown, meanwhile, had sought an order of protection against Mario Green, but he had yet to be served.
Now, there have been questions about how he was able to get into the hospital. We have gotten a statement from Henry Ford Hospital saying, quote, "We have a comprehensive security plan in place that includes metal detectors at the emergency department and an on-site police force. We consistently strive to ensure our facilities are safe and our processes and procedures prioritize security. An internal investigation into this tragic incident is underway." Now, this manhunt for Mario Green continues. If you happen to see him, you are not to approach him. He's considered armed and dangerous. If you see Mario Green, make sure you contact the Detroit Police Department. We're live outside of Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. I'm Jay Scott Smith for Local 4.
Hopefully he's apprehended soon or he turns himself in. Jay, thank you for your report this evening. And our Click on Detroit team has been compiling information about this shooting. Right now, you can find everything we know about Mario Green and get a glimpse inside the hospital as first responders rushed inside. It's all on the homepage at clickondetroit.com.
Nothing worked. If anything, her attempts at peace seemed to make him angrier. The breaking point came when he started following her across cities. Oak Park to Detroit, weaving through traffic, trying to ram her car on Woodward Avenue. Latricia would grip the steering wheel, her knuckles white, checking her rearview mirror every few seconds, praying she'd make it to work alive. Her father had been murdered years earlier. She knew what violence looked like, knew how quickly it could steal everything from you. That trauma lived in her bones, made every threat from Mario feel like a promise. But she kept fighting, kept working, kept believing that somewhere in the system, someone would listen. Latricia worked double shifts to build a better life while dodging a stalker. But half of you watching this probably complain about Monday mornings. Subscribe if you respect women who fight for their futures. Then comment what small daily struggle you'd never have the courage to face like Latricia did. Or stay silent and scroll. Your privilege is showing. June 13th, 2025. Latricia sat in the Wayne County Circuit Court with a pen in her trembling hand and a stack of legal forms that might as well have been written in a foreign language. Personal Protection Order. PPO. 3 letters that were supposed to save her life. She wrote carefully, trying to fit months of terror into tiny boxes on government paperwork. Respondent has been calling my place of employment. Such clinical language for 50 phone calls that made her co-workers flinch every time the phone rang. Respondent has been showing up at my workplace uninvited. Sterile words for the way Mario would appear in the hospital corridors, his tall frame casting shadows that made her heart race. The judge read her petition, looked at her evidence, and denied it. Denied. Like her fear wasn't real enough. Like the documentation wasn't sufficient. Like a woman begging for protection was just another Tuesday morning in family court. Imagine that moment. You pour out your terror onto legal forms, sit in a courtroom full of strangers, and watch a judge decide your life isn't in enough danger yet. What does enough look like? A black eye? A broken bone? A funeral? Latricia walked out of that courthouse with nothing but a piece of paper stamped denied, and the knowledge that Mario would find out she tried to stop him. Because that's how these things work. The system that's supposed to protect you ends up putting you in more danger. Mario escalated immediately, like he'd been waiting for permission. July 21st, 2025. Latricia was back in court, but this time her handwriting was different. Shakier. More desperate. Since I was denied, he has now been able to break into my car and cut up my clothes, shoes, and steal belongings from me. Read that again. Since I was denied. She's connecting the dots for them, explaining that the court's failure had consequences. Real, physical, terrifying consequences. He followed me on multiple occasions, has tried to break my car window. She described Mario tailing her from Oak Park to Detroit, swerving his Charger like a weapon, trying to ram her off Woodward Avenue during rush hour traffic. Picture that. You're driving to work, checking your mirrors, and the man who used to share your bed is trying to kill you with 2 tons of metal and glass. He has continued to call my job and said he will not stop or stop coming after me. 50 calls. 50 times her co-workers had to hear his voice, watch her face change, feel the tension fill the room. 50 reminders that nowhere was safe. But here's the part that breaks me. Latricia wrote, I have tried being cordial because I feel that the system has now let me down each time that I have tried to make reports on this man. Wayne County issued over 3,000 PPOs in 2024. How many went unserved? How many women are walking around right now thinking they're protected by court orders that their abusers have never even seen? Latricia mentioned her father's murder in that July filing. Another layer of trauma. Another reason why Mario's threats felt like promises. She'd already lost one parent to violence. She knew how quickly everything could disappear. I am asking for help before this goes too far, and things are too late. 32 days later, she was dead in a hospital basement. She blamed herself for being nice to her stalker, for trying to keep the peace with someone who was terrorizing her, because the system had failed her so completely that she thought maybe the problem was her approach. I am now in mental distress and scared, not knowing what to do. I am asking for help before this goes too far, and things are too late. Before this goes too far. She knew. Latricia knew exactly where this was heading, and she was begging someone, anyone, to stop it. This time, the judge approved the PPO. Finally, protection on paper. A legal barrier between Latricia and the man who was hunting her. But here's where the system's cruelty becomes almost artistic in its precision. The PPO was never served. Never delivered to Mario. Court records show his address was known, his location documented. But somehow, someway, no one could be bothered to hand him a piece of paper that might have saved Latricia's life.
Could this tragedy have been avoided? Tonight, new documents show the woman killed at Henry Ford Hospital sought protection from her ex-husband, but he never received the papers before that deadly shooting.
Within just the last 30 minutes, we have confirmed Mario Green has been charged with first-degree premeditated murder, discharge of a firearm in a building causing death, aggravated stalking, possession of a firearm by a prohibited person, and 4 counts of felony firearm.
No, police say Green walked into the hospital's basement Friday morning and killed his ex-wife, Latricia Green Brown.
Now, Green was arrested early Saturday on Detroit's east side, and within the last hour has been formally charged in her death. Jay Scott Smith digging into those court documents. And Jay, what are we learning about the victim's efforts to protect herself?
Well, Karen and Demond, it's a long, winding story. What I've got in my hand right now is a PPO, but this is not just a PPO. It also serves as a cry for help that a woman was making, but unfortunately she lost her life doing the job that she loved.
He produced a gun, handgun, and fired multiple shots, killing his ex-wife.
Detroit Police Chief Todd Bettison described the tragic end of the life of 40-year-old Latricia Green Brown, who was gunned down on Friday morning at Henry Ford Hospital. Her ex-husband, 53-year-old Mario Green of Detroit, has been charged with first-degree murder. Twice in the last 3 months, she tried to file for an order of protection against Green, and the shooting appears to be the culmination of months of harassment and abuse. Local 4 obtained copies of these orders, both filed in Wayne County Circuit Court. The first filed on June 13th. Now, Brown and Green were married from 2012 until Green filed for divorce in 2018. According to Brown, Green, who has a violent criminal history including convictions for aggravated stalking and arson, had spent years tormenting his ex-wife. Brown saying that Green had repeatedly called her job and threatened her co-workers. Friday was not the first time Green had shown up at the hospital. According to the first PPO petition, he attempted to get at her in her office on April 18th. On June 1st, Brown said that Green had repeatedly called the hospital and threatened to attack her co-workers. Despite this, the first PPO attempt was denied due to it not being detailed enough to warrant the protection order. On July 21st, 1 month before Brown was killed, she filed for the second PPO, which went into greater detail. It included a July 1st incident where she said Green had broken into her car, stolen her belongings, and cut up her clothes. She also said Green had followed her on multiple occasions, including on July 19th. She also expressed anger at the system she felt repeatedly, quote, let her down, saying, quote, I have to constantly look over my shoulder to make sure this man is not following me, and, quote, I am asking for help before this goes too far. The second PPO was approved by Circuit Court Judge Carla Testani and went into effect that day. Fortunately for Brown, Green had not been served the paperwork. 1 month later, she was dead. Now, Brown had worked at Henry Ford Hospital for more than 20 years, and they say that they are offering counseling services for any employee who needs them, saying in a statement, quote, we continue to cooperate with the DPD investigation, and at the same time, our own internal investigation into how this violence made its way into our place of healing is underway. We are committed to scrutinizing our security measures and taking meaningful steps to enhance the safety and security of our facilities.
I've got to ask you, Jay, I mean, there's a lot here to unpack. Obviously, we got to figure out exactly what happened here in the system that broke down. That's going to be a long process. And then on top of that, I just found out that you learned Green's not the only person charged in Green's death, I should say.
Yes, it's gotten even sadder, to be honest, because a second man has been charged. He's 54-year-old Anthony Barnett. He's been charged as an accessory after the fact for helping Green flee the scene after the shooting on Friday. He's also been charged with lying to a police officer. Both of these men are expected back in court again, by the way, on September 11th for a preliminary hearing.
All right, looking forward to finding out exactly what went wrong with that PPO delivery and process as well. Jay, we really appreciate your work on this.
It's quieter down there, away from the constant beeping of monitors and the chatter of medical staff. Just her and the hum of industrial equipment. She's probably thinking about lunch plans, or her kids' after-school activities, or whether she can pick up an extra shift this weekend. She has no idea that Mario is already in the building. 9:25 a.m. Security cameras capture a tall figure in black moving through the hospital's main entrance. Mario blends in with the morning crowd of visitors and staff. No one stops him. No one asks for ID. The basement elevators are open to the public, a policy designed to help patients and families navigate the hospital easily. That policy is about to get Latricia killed. 9:45 a.m. Latricia is in the basement storage area, probably checking inventory or restocking cleaning supplies. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on concrete walls. It's the kind of place where sound echoes, where footsteps seem louder than they should. Mario is close now. Moving through corridors he's memorized from previous visits. 50 phone calls to this hospital. Multiple uninvited appearances. He knows this place almost as well as Latricia does. 9:52 a.m. A nurse on the third floor is checking on a patient. A doctor in the ER is suturing a wound. A family in the waiting room is praying for good news. Normal hospital rhythms. Life and death and healing happening all around them. In the basement, Mario finds Latricia. At 9:54 a.m. They're face to face now. The woman who tried to escape and the man who refused to let her go. What did he say to her in those final moments? Did he blame her for the PPO? For trying to protect herself? For daring to think she could have a life without him? Did Latricia try to reason with him one last time? Did she beg? Did she run? Or did she stand her ground, knowing that this moment had been inevitable since the day she decided to leave him? At 9:55 a.m., the argument erupts. Brief. Intense. Voices echoing off concrete walls. Other staff members in nearby areas freeze, recognizing the sound of conflict, but not yet understanding the danger. Mario pulls the handgun. Latricia sees it. In that split second, she knows. All those months of fear, all those sleepless nights, all those unanswered pleas for help, they all led to this moment in a hospital basement with a man who would rather kill her than let her live free. The shots ring out. Multiple rounds. Latricia falls to the cold floor, her life bleeding out onto concrete that she'd probably mopped clean just hours earlier. 9:55 a.m. and 37 seconds. Latricia Green-Brown is dead. Mario runs. Black shirt, gold chain. Tall frame moving fast through corridors that suddenly feel like a maze. Staff members dive behind equipment carts, duck into storage rooms, their hearts hammering as they try to process what just happened. At 9:57 a.m., the code silver announcement crackles through the hospital's intercom system. All units to basement level. The words that turn a place of healing into a crime scene. At 9:54 a.m., Latricia was organizing supplies. At 9:55 a.m., she was dead. 1 minute. Subscribe if you understand how quickly everything can change. Then comment the exact time you're watching this, because someone else's last minute is happening right now. Or ignore this and pretend tragedy only happens in videos. The silence after gunshots is different from any other kind of quiet. It's thick, suffocating, filled with the weight of what just happened and the terror of what might happen next. In the basement of Henry Ford Hospital, 47 people experienced that silence together. Housekeeping staff crouched behind industrial carts. Maintenance workers pressed themselves against concrete walls. A few patients who'd been down there for procedures huddled in corners, their hospital gowns offering no protection against the violence that had just shattered their world. Tamara Canada heard the shots from 2 corridors away. She knew that sound. Detroit teaches you to recognize gunfire early. But hearing it in a hospital, in her workplace, in the same building where her friend Latricia was working, made her legs give out. She slid down the wall and stayed there, shaking, until security found her 20 minutes later. Devin Wilford was on the 3rd floor when the code silver announcement echoed through the building. She didn't know yet that her co-worker, her friend, the woman who'd shared coffee and complaints about difficult shifts, was already dead in the basement. She just knew that someone was shooting in her workplace, and everything safe about her world had just disappeared. The lockdown protocols kicked in immediately. Doors sealed. Elevators stopped. The hospital that had been buzzing with normal morning activity suddenly became a fortress, with everyone inside transformed from staff and patients into potential victims. Carmen was in the surgery prep area when a nurse's face went white. "There's an active shooter in the basement," the nurse whispered, and suddenly Carmen wasn't a patient anymore. She was prey, trapped in a building with someone who had already killed. They barricaded the doors with chairs, with medical equipment, with anything heavy enough to slow down a gunman. Patients in wheelchairs were pushed into corners. Someone started crying. Someone else started praying. And everyone waited, listening for footsteps that might belong to a killer. Earlene Ingram's mother was somewhere in that basement. Earlene paced the upper floors, her phone buzzing with unanswered calls, her mind racing through every worst-case scenario. "I was nervous about being shot," she'd tell reporters later, her voice still shaking days afterward. Not safe at all. Outside, West Grand Boulevard transformed into a war zone. Police cars arrived in waves, their sirens cutting through the morning air like screams. ATF agents in tactical gear surrounded the building. A helicopter circled overhead, its rotors beating a mechanical rhythm that would haunt survivors' dreams for months. But inside the hospital, time moved differently. For hours of lockdown, for hours of not knowing if the shooter was still inside, still hunting, for hours of families separated by concrete and fear, wondering if their loved ones were coming home. The ripple effects spread beyond the hospital walls. Schools in the area went into soft lockdown. Businesses closed early. Parents rushed to pick up their children, suddenly aware that violence could reach anywhere, even places designed for healing. Social media exploded with rumors and speculation. Was it terrorism? A disgruntled employee? Gang violence? The truth, that it was domestic violence, that a woman had been murdered by her ex-husband in her workplace, somehow felt both more personal and more terrifying than any of the alternatives. When the all-clear finally came, when police confirmed that the shooter had fled and the building was secure, the real trauma began. Staff members who'd hidden in supply closets emerged blinking into fluorescent light, their hands still shaking. Patients who'd been trapped in the basement were wheeled to upper floors, their faces pale with shock. Devin Wilford learned about Latricia's death hours later, outside the hospital, surrounded by news cameras and police tape. She collapsed, just folded in half like her body couldn't hold the weight of that information. Friends brought her water, held her up, but nothing could wash away the image of Latricia's smile or the knowledge that she'd never see it again. She was humble, quiet, Devin told reporters through her tears. She wasn't drama. You would never think something like this would happen to her. The hospital tried to return to normal operations, but normal was gone. Staff members jumped at sudden noises. Patients asked extra questions about security. The basement, once just another work area, became a crime scene, then a memorial, then a place that people avoided if they could help it. Latricia's family arrived to find their daughter, their mother, their sister reduced to a news story. Police tape and evidence markers where she used to work. Reporters asking for comments about a woman they'd never met, but whose death would define her legacy. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Flowers appeared outside the hospital. Candles. Signs reading "Justice for Latricia" and "Protect Black Women." Strangers who'd never heard her name before August 22nd suddenly understood that her death represented something bigger, something systemic, something that could happen to anyone. Devin collapsed crying outside the hospital where a friend was murdered. But most of you will finish this video and immediately watch something funny. Subscribe if you can sit with grief for more than 30 seconds. Then comment, "Devin's pain matters." Or prove you treat trauma like entertainment. Your next click will tell us everything. The manhunt for Mario Green lasted exactly 17 hours and 5 minutes. In a city where murder cases can go unsolved for years, where killers disappear into the urban maze of Detroit and never surface again, Mario's capture was swift, decisive, and almost anticlimactic. At 2:55 a.m. on August 23, 2025, police found him on LeMay Street near East Warren Avenue, just miles from Henry Ford Hospital. He wasn't hiding in an abandoned building or holed up in some criminal safe house. He was just there, walking the streets like a man with nowhere left to run. No dramatic chase, no shootout, no final standoff. Mario Green, the man who terrorized Latricia for months and murdered her in cold blood, surrendered without a fight. His tall frame slumped as officers cuffed him, the gold chain around his neck catching the streetlight one last time. Chief Todd Bettison called him a monster in his public statement. "Our officers worked tirelessly to get this monster off the street," he said, his voice heavy with the kind of exhaustion that comes from seeing too much violence in one city. The community had flooded police with tips, surveillance footage, sightings. Detroit had mobilized to catch Latricia's killer, and they'd succeeded. But here's what kept me awake after reading about his arrest. The same system that caught Mario in less than 18 hours had failed to serve him a simple piece of paper for over a month. Think about that. Police coordinated with ATF, FBI, Michigan State Police, and the Wayne County Sheriff's Office. They processed surveillance footage, tracked down witnesses, canvassed neighborhoods, and apprehended a murderer before most people had finished their morning coffee. But somehow, nobody could deliver a PPO to his known address. The evidence against Mario was overwhelming. Hospital surveillance showed him entering the basement, confronting Latricia, firing multiple shots. Witnesses saw him flee. His abandoned Dodge Charger tied him to the scene. Latricia's PPO filings provided clear motive. Months of documented stalking, harassment, and threats. Wayne County Prosecutor's Office started building their case immediately. Murder in the first degree. Felony firearm charges. With video evidence and witness testimony, conviction seemed inevitable. But for Latricia's family, Mario's arrest was just the beginning of a different kind of nightmare. The slow grind of the legal system. Trials in Michigan can take years. Appeals can take longer. And while lawyers argue about evidence and procedure, Latricia's children grow up without their mother. Her co-workers return to a basement where their friend was murdered. And her community grapples with the knowledge that the system designed to protect her had failed catastrophically. The investigation revealed details that made the failure even more infuriating. Mario's criminal history read like a stalker's resume: aggravated stalking, arson, multiple probation violations. He'd been released from probation in June 2025, just weeks before Latricia filed her second PPO. No oversight, no monitoring. No one checking to see if the man with a history of terrorizing women was terrorizing women. Court records showed that Mario's address was known and documented. The PPO had been approved by a Wayne County judge on July 21st. 32 days later, Latricia was dead, and Mario had never even seen the court order that was supposed to protect her. How does that happen? In a county that issued over 3,000 PPOs in 2024, how many others went unserved? How many women are walking around right now thinking they're protected by court orders that their abusers have never received? The hospital launched an internal investigation, reviewing security protocols and access procedures. Too little, too late. But at least they were asking the right questions. How did Mario enter the building undetected? Why wasn't security briefed about Latricia's situation? Should the basement have been more restricted? A former employee told reporters that the basement elevators were accessible to anyone. No ID checks, no security screening. The policy was designed to help patients and families navigate the hospital easily. But it also made it easy for a stalker to hunt his victim in her workplace. Henry Ford Hospital released a statement confirming the attack's domestic violence roots and promising to review their procedures. But statements don't bring back the dead, and reviews don't erase trauma. The community response was immediate and sustained. Protests formed outside Wayne County courts, demanding faster PPO enforcement and better protection for domestic violence victims. Signs reading "Justice for Latricia" and "Protect Black Women" became fixtures at rallies and vigils. Advocates pointed to the statistics that everyone knows, but nobody wants to face. Black women are killed by intimate partners at rates far higher than other demographics. Every 5 hours in America, a black woman dies from domestic violence. Latricia's case wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom of a system that consistently fails the women who need it most. Mario's swift capture highlighted the contradiction at the heart of this tragedy. When police want to find someone, they can mobilize incredible resources and achieve remarkable results. But when a woman needs protection from her abuser, the same system moves at a glacial pace, if it moves at all. The abandoned Charger told its own story. Found 6 miles from the hospital in a residential neighborhood, it suggested panic rather than planning. Mario hadn't prepared an escape route or thought through the consequences. This was a man consumed by rage, acting on impulse, destroying lives without considering his own future. Police caught Mario in 18 hours, but it took months for courts to fail Latricia. Subscribe if you believe justice should move faster than bureaucracy. Then comment one system that's failed you personally. Or stay comfortable in your bubble, where institutions always work. Must be nice up there. Mario Green sits in a Wayne County jail cell tonight, but Latricia's story isn't over. It can't be over, because right now, as you're watching this, there's another woman filling out PPO paperwork with shaking hands. Another judge deciding if her fear is credible enough. Another court clerk adding another unserved protection order to a pile that grows taller every day. The trial will come eventually. Mario's lawyers will argue about evidence and procedure, while Latricia's family sits in a courtroom, forced to relive her murder over and over again. The media will cover the verdict, then move on to the next tragedy. But the system that killed Latricia will keep grinding along, unchanged. Here's what we know happened after August 22nd. Henry Ford Hospital reviewed their security protocols. Wayne County promised to examine their PPO service procedures. Detroit police praised the community response that helped catch Mario so quickly. Everyone patted themselves on the back for doing their jobs after a woman was already dead. But here's what we don't know. How many other women filed PPOs that same week that went unserved? How many other hospitals have basement areas accessible to stalkers? How many other Mario Greens are out there right now, escalating their abuse, while the system moves at bureaucratic speed? Latricia's children are growing up without their mother. Her co-workers still flinch when they hear unexpected noises in the basement. Devin Wilford still cries when she talks about her friend. Tamara Canada still thinks about the conversations they had about difficult exes, wishing she'd known how to help. The ripple effects of domestic violence don't end with the funeral. They spread through families, workplaces, communities, creating trauma that lasts for generations. Latricia's children will carry this with them forever. Her co-workers will never feel completely safe at work again. Her community learned that even hospitals aren't sanctuaries from violence. But there's something else spreading through Detroit, something that gives me hope even in the middle of this darkness. Anger. The productive kind of anger that demands change instead of just accepting tragedy as inevitable. Community groups are pushing for mandatory timelines on PPO service. Advocates are demanding better training for judges who decide whether women's fears are valid. Hospital workers are asking harder questions about security protocols and workplace safety. Latricia's case has become a rallying cry, but it shouldn't have taken her death to get people's attention. Black women have been sounding alarms about domestic violence for decades. They've been filing reports, seeking protection, begging for help, and dying when that help doesn't come. The statistics are brutal and consistent. Black women face intimate partner violence at rates that should shock us into action. Instead, we've normalized it, accepted it as background noise in a society that doesn't value black women's lives enough to protect them. Mario's capture in 18 hours proves that when the system wants to act quickly, it can. Police coordinated across multiple agencies, processed evidence, tracked down leads, and apprehended a killer before most people finished their morning coffee. But that same system couldn't deliver a piece of paper to his known address in 32 days. The questions that keep me awake at night aren't about Mario's guilt. The evidence is overwhelming. They're about the next Latricia, the woman who's filing a PPO right now, hoping the system will work better for her than it did for Latricia Green Brown. Will her protection order be served? Will her workplace take her safety seriously? Will the judge believe her when she says she's afraid? Will anyone listen before it's too late? Latricia did everything right. She left her abuser. She documented his harassment. She filed for protection. She reported his threats. She followed every piece of advice that domestic violence advocates give to women in her situation. And she died anyway, in a hospital basement, while the system that was supposed to protect her failed at every level. That's the real horror of this story. Not that Mario was evil. We expect that from abusers. The horror is that good people, well-meaning people, people who genuinely wanted to help, created a system so broken that a woman could beg for protection in writing and still end up dead. The unfinished business isn't just about justice for Latricia. It's about preventing the next tragedy, fixing the system that failed her, and honoring her memory by making sure other women don't die the way she did. But that requires more than thoughts and prayers and social media posts. It requires sustained pressure on courts to serve PPOs faster. It requires hospitals to take workplace safety seriously. It requires communities to believe women when they say they're in danger. Most importantly, it requires all of us to stay angry long enough to demand change, not just until the next news cycle distracts us. Latricia's story ends here, but thousands of women are writing PPOs right now that won't be served. Subscribe if you believe their stories deserve to be heard before they become headlines. Then comment, "Next story matters." Or scroll away and pretend this was just entertainment. Latricia's children will read these comments someday.